The Miss Dashwoods had now been rather more than 2 months in town, and Marianne's impatience to be gone increased every day. Elinor was hardly less anxious than herself for their removal, and had already mentioned their wishes to their kind hostess, who resisted them with all the eloquence of her good will, when a plan was suggested which, though detaining them from home yet a few weeks longer, appeared to Elinor altogether much more eligible than any other. The Palmers were to remove to Cleveland about the end of March for the Easter holidays, and Mrs. Jennings, with both her friends, received a very warm invitation from Charlotte to go with them. It was enforced with so much real politeness by Mr. Palmer himself as induced her to accept it with pleasure. When she told Marianne what she had done, however, her first reply was not very auspicious. "Cleveland? No! I cannot go to Cleveland." "You forget," said Elinor gently. "It is not in the neighbourhood of—" "But it is in Somersetshire. I cannot get into Somersetshire. No, Elinor, you cannot expect me to go there." Elinor would not argue upon the propriety of overcoming such feelings. She only represented it as returning to that dear mother whom she so much wished to see. From Cleveland, which was within a few miles from Bristol, the distance to Barton was not beyond 1 day, and as there could be no occasion for their staying above a week at Cleveland, they might now be at home in a little more than 3 weeks' time. Mrs. Jennings pressed them earnestly to return with her again from Cleveland. Elinor was grateful for the attention, but it could not alter their design. "Ah, Colonel, I do not know what you and I shall do without the Miss Dashwoods," was Mrs. Jennings' address to Colonel Brandon when he first called on her, after their leaving her was settled. On Elinor's moving to the window, he followed her to it with a look of particular meaning. "I have heard," said he, with great compassion, "of the injustice your friend Mr. Ferrars has suffered from his family. I understand that he intends to take orders. Will you be so good as to tell him that the living of Delaford, now just vacant, as I am informed by this day's post, is his, if he think it worth his acceptance?" Elinor's astonishment at this commission could hardly have been greater. The preferment, which only 2 days before she had considered as hopeless for Edward, was already provided to enable him to marry, and she, of all people in the world, was fixed to bestow it. She thanked him for it with all her heart, and promised to undertake the commission with pleasure, if it were really his wish to put off so agreeable an office to another. Edward, she believed, was still in town, and fortunately she had heard his address from Miss Steele. She could undertake, therefore, to inform him of it in the course of the day. How should she express herself in her note to Edward was now all her concern. She sat deliberating over her paper with her pen in her hand, till broken in on by the entrance of Edward himself. He had met Mrs. Jennings at the door in her way to the carriage as he came to leave his farewell card, and she, after apologizing for not returning herself, had obliged him to enter by saying that Miss Dashwood was above and wanted to speak with him on a very particular business. Elinor had just been congratulating herself that, however difficult it might be to express herself properly by letter, it was at least preferable to giving the information by word of mouth, when her visitor entered. Her astonishment and confusion were very great on his so sudden appearance. He was too much distressed, and they sat down together in a most promising state of embarrassment. "Mrs. Jennings told me," said he, "that you wished to speak with me, at least I understood her so, or I certainly should not have intruded on you in such a manner, though at the same time I should have been extremely sorry to leave London without seeing you and your sister."